Muse
Look, no, because what bothers me, Ernie, every year you travel the country and you go to New York and do people like
Charles Barkley has never needed a script. At 62, he speaks with the same force he once used to clear space under the rim. When Barkley talks, people listen not because he's polished, but because he's real. He never won an NBA championship, and he never hid from it. What he built instead was a reputation that outlasted rings, honesty, courage, and respect. He came into the league in the mid-80s, shorter than most power forwards but stronger than nearly anyone. He wasn't supposed to dominate the boards, yet he did through sheer will, instinct, and pride. Barkley didn't just play the game, he confronted it. Every possession, every rebound, every microphone became a test of truth. Now, decades after his final game, that truth hasn't changed. Sitting in the TNT studio, he looks back on a lifetime in basketball: the battles, the friendships, the lessons. When asked to name the 5 players he truly admires, he doesn't hesitate. I admire people who made me better, he says. Guys who didn't fake greatness, they lived it. For Barkley, admiration isn't about statistics. It's about the men who shaped him. Julius Erving, who taught him class and control. Moses Malone, the mentor who demanded effort and changed his career. MichaelJordan, the standard of relentless will. Shaquille O'Neal, the rival-turned-brother who proved power could carry humor. And Larry Bird, the quiet assassin who defined intelligence on the court. Every name is a reflection of who Barkley became: flawed, fearless, and unforgettable. He doesn't talk about what he missed. He talks about what he learned. With the studio silent, Barkley leans forward and says what only he can say. These 5 men didn't just play the game. They showed me what greatness really looks like. When Charles Barkley first walked into the Philadelphia 76ers locker room in 1984, Julius Erving was already a legend. The team called him Doc, and even in silence, he commanded attention. Barkley, still raw and loud from college ball, had never seen anyone carry that kind of calm power. Dr. J didn't have to talk about greatness, he wore it. Barkley remembers standing at the edge of the practice court, watching Erving glide through drills. Every move was smooth, measured, almost poetic. There was no waste, no show for the crowd. Just precision and grace. Barkley would later say, he was the first man who made me understand that basketball could be art. But what left the deepest mark wasn't the dunks or the elegance, it was the discipline. Erving arrived early, left late, and treated rookies with respect but no excuses. When Barkley showed up to training camp out of shape, it was Erving who pulled him aside. He didn't yell. He looked Barkley in the eye and said, "You've got the talent, young fella. Now you need the purpose." Those words cut deeper than any coach's lecture. Over that first season, Barkley learned how to carry himself. He watched how Dr. J dealt with fans, media, even defeat, always with composure. When the crowd booed, he smiled. When teammates fought, he listened. It wasn't weakness, it was mastery. The kind Barkley had never seen before. By the time Erving retired 2 years later, Barkley was no longer just a powerful rookie, he was a professional. He still argued, still spoke his mind, but he now understood the difference between emotion and control. In his own way, he had inherited something from Doc, that rare mix of elegance and authority. Years later, Barkley would admit that every time he lost his temper on the court, he thought of Julius Erving, the calm and contrast, the standard he could never fully reach but always respected. He showed me, Barkley said, that greatness isn't loud. It's steady. If Julius Erving showed Charles Barkley what grace looked like, Moses Malone showed him what survival meant. When Barkley joined the Sixers, he was talented but undisciplined, overweight, inconsistent, and too proud to admit it. Moses saw through him in one glance. He didn't talk about potential. He talked about work. One day during training camp, Moses called him aside and said, "You're fat and you're lazy. But you don't have to be." There was no insult in his voice, only truth. That was the moment Barkley met the man who would change everything. Moses took him under his wing. They ran together, lifted together, sweated through endless drills. No cameras, no quotes, just grind. Barkley followed because he saw something deeper, a man who didn't need attention to dominate. Moses was already a 3-time MVP, a champion, a rebounding machine. Yet he acted like every possession was his last. That humility stunned Barkley. Over the next months, Barkley dropped weight, gained endurance, and learned what it meant to prepare like a professional. When teammates went home, Moses stayed for another hour. "You can't cheat the game," he would say. Barkley absorbed that lesson the way he once chased rebounds with hunger. Their bond became personal. Moses became more than a mentor, he became a father figure. He told Barkley when he was wrong and praised him only when it mattered. The two traveled together, ate together, argued, and laughed like family. When the Sixers played big men like Kareem or Parrish, Moses showed Barkley how to fight smarter, not harder. Years later, when Moses passed away, Barkley said quietly, "Without Moses, there would be no Charles Barkley." It wasn't sentiment, it was fact. Moses Malone taught him the value of sweat, humility, and accountability. And from that point on, Barkley carried those lessons everywhere from the paint to the microphone. Among all the names Charles Barkley mentions, none carries more weight or more conflict than MichaelJordan. They entered the league just a year apart, both burning with the same need to prove themselves. Jordan was the perfectionist, Barkley was the rebel. But when they met on the court, competition turned into something electric. In the late 80s and early 90s, every matchup between the Bulls and the Suns or Sixers felt personal. Barkley respected Jordan's will long before the world called him the greatest. He saw it up close, the endless workouts, the precision, the cold intensity that filled every possession. He never played casual, Barkley would later say. Every game was a statement. Off the court, they were close. The two shared dinners, golf games, and jokes that only stars could tell each other. For a time, they were brothers bound by fame and an obsession with competition. But brotherhood between alphas never stays simple. When Barkley began to criticize the Bulls front office years later, Jordan took it personally. The friendship faded, though the respect never did. Barkley has always been honest about that distance. He doesn't romanticize it, doesn't make excuses. "I still think he's the best to ever play," he said once, "but being great doesn't mean you're perfect." It's the kind of statement only Barkley could deliver, truth without bitterness. What Jordan gave him wasn't friendship alone, it was a mirror. Every time Barkley stepped on the floor against him, he measured his own fire. Every loss was a lesson in focus. Every win rare as it was felt earned. Years later, sitting in the studio, Barkley still talks about Jordan with the tone of a man who knows he witnessed something unrepeatable. The competition may have ended, but the respect never left. "Michael taught me," Barkley says, "that greatness demands everything, even the parts of you that hurt." When Charles Barkley talks about Shaquille O'Neal, the tone shifts, half admiration, half amusement. Their story began as rivals and ended as brothers. In the mid-90s, Shaq was the new force taking over the league, younger, stronger, and impossible to move. Barkley, already a veteran in Houston, saw the challenge and met it head-on. Every matchup between them felt like two planets colliding. In those games, Barkley didn't back down. He knew Shaq's power, 7 feet tall, over 300 pounds, could bury anyone in the paint. But he also knew that respect in basketball is earned, not given. "You have to fight for it," Barkley once said. "Shaq respected me because I never moved out of the way." Their battles were fierce but clean. No cheap shots, no fake anger, just two competitors testing the limits of pride. Then, after retirement, something unexpected happened. The rivalry turned into friendship. When the two joined the TNT broadcast team, their chemistry was instant. The laughter, the arguments, the teasing, it was real. Millions of viewers tuned in not for analysis, but for the raw honesty between them. Barkley often says Shaq reminded him that greatness doesn't need to be serious all the time. For all the power and dominance, Shaq still brought joy to the game, something Barkley had lost near the end of his career. Together, they turned competition into connection. Behind the jokes and television banter, Barkley's respect runs deep. He knows what it takes to dominate a generation. "Shaq was the most unstoppable player I ever faced," he once said. "You didn't beat him, you survived him." When the lights fade in the studio, Barkley sometimes glances at Shaq and smiles. Two men who once tried to destroy each other under the basket now sit side by side, still pushing each other in a different way. Shaq taught me, Barkley says, that strength means nothing if you can't laugh through it. Charles Barkley has never hidden his admiration for Larry Bird. The respect came early and it never faded. When Barkley faced the Boston Celtics in the mid-80s, Bird was already a legend, the silent killer from French Lick who made every possession feel like a chess match. Barkley was physical, emotional, and loud. Bird was the opposite, calm, deliberate, and ruthless in his precision. The first time Barkley guarded him, he learned a truth that never left him. Bird didn't need to be faster or stronger, he just needed to think quicker. He'd tell you where he was going, then score there anyway. Every shot looked effortless, every word cut deep. He talked trash, Barkley once said, but the thing was he always backed it up. There was one night in Boston Garden that stuck with him. Barkley was locked in, scoring, rebounding, doing everything right. Bird barely spoke until the fourth quarter. He hit 3 straight shots and turned to Barkley with that quiet smirk, "You're having a good game, but I'm winning this one." And he did. For Barkley, it wasn't humiliation, it was revelation. Bird's genius wasn't athletic, it was mental. He saw the game 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Off the court, Barkley and Bird shared the same blunt honesty. They didn't dress it up, didn't sugarcoat. When Bird later became a coach and executive, Barkley admired how he carried himself, no drama, no ego, just results. "Larry was the smartest player I ever faced," he said. "He made me respect the game even more." In a league filled with noise, Bird taught Barkley the value of silence, the kind that comes from absolute confidence. And decades later, when Barkley talks about him, his voice softens, not out of nostalgia but out of understanding. "Larry didn't beat you with flash," Barkley says. "He beat you with truth." The lights in the TNT studio fade to a quiet glow. Charles Barkley leans forward, elbows on his knees, his voice lower now, not the booming laugh millions know, but the tone of a man reflecting. He has just named 5 players, but what he really named were 5 lessons. Julius Erving taught him grace. Moses Malone, discipline. MichaelJordan, will. Shaquille O'Neal, strength with humor. Larry Bird, intelligence without noise. These men shaped him more than any trophy ever could. Barkley never won a ring, and that fact has followed him his entire career. But looking back, he doesn't see absence, he sees influence. He played against legends, learned from giants, and became one himself, not because he was perfect, but because he never stopped being honest. To him, basketball was never only about points or banners. It was about truth, about showing up every night ready to compete, ready to respect those who pushed you to your limit. That is why, decades later, Barkley can still speak with clarity and peace. He knows what greatness feels like because he stood next to it, battled it, and learned from it. He looks up, smiles, and says the words that summarize his entire journey. "I wasn't the best. But I got to play with the best, and that made me better than I ever imagined." The camera holds on his face, the mix of pride and humility unmistakable. In the silence that follows, Barkley's message lingers, a reminder that greatness isn't just about winning. It's about who you become while trying. "So tell me," he says finally, looking straight into the lens, "who would be on your list of players you truly admire?"